Now let's look at one step ahead example. So I'm going to remove this, and I've actually already prepared example number 2, and I'm going to simply copy this, paste it in our code. Let's just go through it. In this example, we have variable var a is equal to 1, console.log, and we have 2 functions, and we have the running of the 2 functions 3 times, right? 13, 14, 15 line numbers, right? So let's see how this code makes our execution context slightly different. So all of this is inside the global execution context. So it gets placed over here, just the way in our previous example. So now when the code starts to execute, so let's see all the code is over here, it's gonna go line number 1, execute that code, go to line number 2, execute that code, and these are just, not executions, these are just definitions of the function, so it basically doesn't execute it, nothing to execute here. And then it reaches line number 13, and line number 13 says, let's have fun, all right? So it says, oh, let's have fun is a new function, so I need to go find that function and then run that function, right? So it goes to that function and says, okay, this is a new environment, a new context, a new scope in which we need to run this function. So now I'm going to create a new execution context, and basically I'm just going to make this small, and it adds another execution context on top, and in this case this is going to be the let's have fun execution context, all right? So it says, okay, I'm going to pause here, I'm going to pause on line number 13, and now I'm going to run anything that's inside. So over here in this example it only has 1 line, so it simply prints that and says, okay, I've done this job, I've printed it, and now I'm going to move on to line number 14. So once this particular execution of the function completes, this execution context is destroyed. It's like, oh, I did this is gone now. It returns back to the global execution context, line number 14, and it says, okay, what do I need to do now? Oh, I need to run this function one more time. So another new execution context is created again. And in this case, this has some new variables. So it's the same function, but it has new variables passed to it, right? So new values passed to it. So another execution context is created, it's run, and then it's destroyed, right? It goes back to the global context, global execution context. So far you've seen that the call stack is something also known as, it's not also known as, but something to know about is last in, first out. So this is the one first created, then based on whatever code was there, a new context was created, and let's say if there was another function inside, another context would be created, and until that finishes, it would be destroyed and it would go back to the previous execution context. So that's how the execution call stack goes up and goes down, right? Make sense? Right? So this is slightly, to digest some information, but you're seeing how the flow of the JavaScript engine works and reading about these or learning about these different concepts, but they're going to go a little bit more advanced, all right? So stay with me over here. So now we were on line number 15, right? So line number 15, same deal. Okay, we need to run this function this time, all right? So let's do some work. So it says, oh, this is a new function, so I'm going to create a new execution context for this, right? Run this code, whatever the code is inside here. All right, sorry, line number 10. And once it's done, we're going to basically destroy this. So destroyed, and then goes back over here and says, okay, line number 15 is done. I do not need to execute anything further, so I'm going to destroy this execution context as well. So that's how the call stack works in JavaScript. It takes one execution context at a time. One execution context calls for another execution context, and the call stack stacks up, and then based on what is done and what is not done, this stack keeps on loading up and up and up. So one example would be, let's say, if this particular function was calling this particular function, then after this function would be called, the execution context, let's say this is for one of the functions, this function, whatever the execution context for this one is calling another one, so another one would be stacked up. And unless that is done, that would be destroyed, and then it would resume the previous one. This one is done, so it's going to then resume back to the previous one that called it. So that's how the call stack works, and I'm going to talk to you in the next video.